Welcome to the final video on the math methods that we will cover. In this video, we're going to cover probably the most challenging math method of them all. And this is the random method. This is the math random method. As it suggests in the name, this is a method that returns a random number. Now, if you, let's go over like a simple statement first. If I have math dot random, and that's all, no arguments passed, this is going to output a number from 0.0 to 1.0, not including 1.0. So it's going to be, for example, 0.2, 0.3, 0.7, right? And this is, you don't want this, right? It's kind of messy, right? You don't want just random numbers from 0 to 1, 0.0 to 1.0. So we obviously have to control this. How do we control this? Now this is where we get challenged a little bit. Let me go over an example. So I just want to reiterate, if we just do math.random, we're just going to get a number from 0.0 to 1.0, and we don't really want that. That's kind of, that's not what we want. Typically, when we do random numbers, we want a number from 1 to 10, for example, or if we're rolling a dice, or rolling dice, we would have 1 to 6. We'll go over those kinds of examples when we go switch to the IDE, but in this example here, I'm just going to go over a simple program that prints out a random number from 1 to 10. So int random. Notice I'm doing int because we're going to use something called casting. It's not a challenging idea, and that's why we're not, I'm not going to explain too much. It's very simple, but we're going to use casting. So let's first type out math.random. This is what we saw before. This is a number from 0.0 to 1.0, not including 1.0. Now, the way this goes is following. So listen to this carefully. We multiply, and I'm writing the asterisk because that's what multiplication is. We multiply this math.random to the range of numbers that we would have. Now, when I say range, I don't mean like the maximum minus the minimum necessarily. What I mean is, for example, if I write 10 here, if I start at the number 2, for example, we would go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 10 total digits. So that would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh one, eighth one, ninth one, 10th one. So we start at 2 and we count all the way to 11 because there's a total of 10 numbers. And that's what this specifies. Now, I started at 2 in this example, but it doesn't have to start at 2. We can specify where we want to start at. And the way we specify that is by adding the starting value. So we add to that. So I want it to go from 1 to 10. So I'm going to add to that 1. So in this situation, let's write it out. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because there's a total of 10 digits. That's what we specified here. Now, if I change this to 12, we would have 12 digits. So it would be 11, 12. And if I change this to 0, we would start at 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we don't really print this 12 here. It would only be from 0 to 11. Those are the possible values that can be outputted when we print out random. That's basically it. It's kind of challenging at first, but remember, this plus that you add is your initial value. And it's times 12. I know I called it like a range, but I'll still call it a range. Range is probably not the best word for this, but it's basically starting at this value, and then we're counting up that many numbers. And then those are the total possibilities. Those are all the possible numbers that we can get for when we print out random. Hopefully that's a good explanation. We'll go over to the IDE and we'll do one more example, and that'll be clear. But here, if I do this is going to be a double. So we have to cast it. So we'll cast it and we'll do int. Cast it to an int. This is how you print out a random. You might be saying this is so complicated just for a random number, but in some other programming languages like C++, it's actually way more complicated. So, just think about that. This is actually relatively simple once you understand the idea behind the range, the number of numbers, and then the starting value. It's very simple. So the output, if I print this out, system out dot println random. Remember, starting at 0 and then 1 to, I said I was going to do from 1 to 10. I'm going to do that 1 to 10. So we would start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we would choose a random number. The computer would choose a random number, for example, 5. Now, it's not going to be entirely random because it's a program and it's not completely random. But for the purposes of this video and for the purposes of, of most, programming tutorials, we're not worrying about that. As long as we get a random number and it's somewhat random, that's all we care about. So it's going to output some number. I can't tell you what because I don't know. Depends on the program, from 1 to 10. And that's basically what we're worrying about in this video. Let's switch over to the IDE.
All right, so now we're gonna demonstrate the random method. So of course we always do import java.long.math, but now let's go in our main method and let's say int random. And let's first demonstrate this with simply just mat.random. So int random is equal to mat.random. And simply just mat.random. Now let's end that with a semicolon, just print out the result. But now let's run it. So print a random. And now let's run it. But there's one thing I actually want to point out. When you do mat.random, it's actually going to be a double. And therefore, we need to change it to a double. And it's going to basically print out a random double from 0.0 to 1.0 and not including 1.0. So now if we keep running this program, we see it's going to print out random numbers between 0.0 to 1.0 not included. You see some huge numbers, but usually when you use mat.random, you usually use it for int, and we also use it for a specific range. So now let's actually demonstrate that. So after mat.random, let's do times. And in this case, I'm going to say 6, which means how many numbers do you want in a range? And random is basically generating a random number within that specific range. So the range is 6. And let's say, for example, +2, which means the initial value is starting at. And now let's give a comment saying starting at 2. And now let's look at the range. So 2, start at 2. And now let's give a comment for the range. So from 2, so let's take a list of the range. So 2, 3, range of 6, starting at 2, and then 2, 3. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's only going to stop at 7 because 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is 6 numbers. And that's what it means by times 6. It means how many numbers are you having in this range? And keep note that you're starting at 2 and not 0. So now let's actually print out random. So system out println random. Now let's run it in our program to actually demonstrate how this random works. So system out println random. And now we're going to have 2 print line statements. And each of them are going to be printing out different results because when you use mat.random, it's basically generating a random number. So to test that out, let's actually run our program. So print it out. So error we made here is we have to make sure that we cast it to an int first off. So int, and remember how you cast values, you do int parentheses, the name of the primitive value in this case, so int, and now let's run it. One mistake I actually made earlier is when you have 2 different system out println random, they're basically one variable only. So they're going to be the same variable. So that's also one thing you want to know, is that when you create a variable, it's always going to have the same value stored in that variable. So that's basically another thing I want to point out. Now, if you want to create a different variable that has a different number, now let's create int random1, and you're basically saying the same thing. And now let's print out both of those variables. So let's run our program. And now we see it's going to print out different numbers. It may coincidentally print out the same numbers, but now we see it's going to print out 6, 4, but sometimes it may print out 6, 6, or that basically depends on what number is being generated randomly. And so that's basically what random does. So here we see 5, 5. That's both of those variables, they both stored a random value of 5. And so basically that's how we can demonstrate random method and how we can use it when you make programs. So that's basically it for random method. Thanks.